The Klingon's eyes bulged in agony as Admiral Kevin Burns crushed the alien's throat with an armored gauntlet, squeezing until purple blood oozed between his fingers and the Klingon's head lolled to the side, spine snapped. Kevin dropped the lifeless corpse and activated his comms. Tharos eliminated, Deck 5 clear. Confirmed. Flagship secured, Admiral. All Klingons neutralized. Shipyard status. Completely destroyed, sir. Their war machine is crippled. Kevin nodded grimly, surveying the devastation through the view screen as his fleet bombarded the smoldering ruins with missile barrages. The charred skeletons of warships littered the void, drifting among crystallized globules of the Klingons' green blood. This brutal assault was retaliation for the Klingons, annihilating humanity's colony on Sigma Centauri. Those 5 million souls demanded vengeance, and now the Klingons were paying the price for slaughtering civilians. But obliterating this military installation and executing their leadership wasn't enough. As Tharos had mocked with his dying breath, the Klingon Empire vastly outmatched Earth's primitive forces. Mankind had bloodied the Klingons' nose today, but an entire galaxy of the savage aliens remained, thirsty to finish exterminating the human filth from the stars. Humanity needed to strike harder and faster before the Klingons regrouped. If the hairless apes of Earth failed to seize the initiative now, then billions would perish in the Klingons' xenocidal purge across human space. Kevin opened a channel to Solcom. Earth, this is Admiral Burns. The Klingon Central Command is neutralized, and the war has begun. We're out of time. Activate Majestic. Initiate Apollo. All special projects are go. We either win now, or we die. Tharos spat a glob of blood in his human interrogator's face. Fuck you, ape. You'll never find the firestorm. The interrogator smashed a shock baton into Tharos's jaw, sending a current of searing agony through his body. Tharos screamed, convulsing against his restraints. The smell of burnt hair and charred flesh filled the cell. Suddenly alarms wailed throughout the prison. Shouts and gunfire erupted in the corridors. The interrogator whirled as the door blasted open, shredded by breaching charges. Klingon commandos stormed in, disruptors blazing, tearing the humans to pieces. The strike leader shot Tharos's chains. Lord Tharos, we must go now! Tharos tried to stand but collapsed, his ravaged body failing. The Klingons dragged him out, cutting down guards as they sprinted for their ship. Tharos blacked out as they lifted off, his blood pooling on the deck. He awoke in a medbay, agony searing his body. He was more machine now than flesh. His shattered bones had been replaced by duranium. Snarling, Tharos rose from the table, servos whining. He was reborn, rebuilt for vengeance. Tharos stormed into the war room and backhanded the commander out of his way. The Terrans' insolence cannot stand. We strike their world now, assemble the fleet. General Marak spoke up. My lord, attacking Earth now is madness. We should fortify our... Tharos grabbed Marak's skull and crushed it to pulp with his new cybernetic hand. Any other objections? The Klingons bowed their heads. No, Lord Tharos, we obey. Tharos' metal fist punched a hole in the hollow display of Earth. I'm coming for you, Kevin. I'll rip your heart out myself. Kevin stood on the bridge of the Titan, his flagship, as the Klingon armada emerged from hyperspace in a storm of swirling energy. The savage aliens had brought 1,000 warships to exterminate humanity. The fleet's scans showed humanity was outnumbered 10-1. They were fucked. Deploy the Trojan horse, it's our only chance, Kevin said. Aye, aye, sir, the comms officer replied. Transmitting orders now. The human fleet turned as one and fled, the slowest and most damaged ships at the rear, the newer ones pulling ahead. The Titan shook as its engines strained. On the view screen, the Klingon ships surged after them, disruptor cannons charging. They're taking the bait, Kevin said. How long until they reach optimal range? 2 minutes, the tactical officer said. The bridge crew watched the scans, sweat beading their faces, pulses pounding. This was it. If the Klingons didn't follow them far enough. They're still pursuing, the sensor operator called out. Passing the outer asteroid belt now. Hidden among the asteroids, the real human fleet powered up. Fresh ships top of the line with full armaments, they emerged from the rocks like ancient leviathans rising from the deep. The Klingons realized their mistake too late. The human ships opened their missile tubes and ripple-fired a tsunami of nuclear mines into the Klingons' rear. The aliens tried to turn and raise shields, but they were too slow, too scattered from the pursuit. The mines detonated. Kevin had to shield his eyes as nuclear fire erupted across space. The flash lit the asteroids like a small sun. When it faded, a third of the Klingon fleet was gone, reduced to glowing wreckage. But they weren't finished yet. "Status of the stealth teams?" Kevin asked. "They're aboard the enemy command ship," the comms officer replied. "Engaging now." On the bridge of the Klingon flagship, Tharos watched in disbelief as his forces reeled, caught in an expertly laid ambush. Suddenly shimmers of light caught his eye. He whirled as a dozen human commandos materialized out of thin air, clad in jet-black power armor, plasma rifles leveled at the bridge crew. The humans opened fire, superheated plasma bolts scything through the Klingons like a scythe through wheat. Consoles exploded, and bodies tumbled as the humans advanced, merciless. They were demons, blinking in and out of sight, untouchable. Tharos raised his disruptor with a bellowing war cry and charged, firing wildly. The bolts passed harmlessly through the human's armor. A hulking commando turned and smashed his rifle butt into Tharos's face, breaking his jaw and sending him crashing to the deck. The humans stormed out, leaving the bridge a abattoir. Tharos struggled to rise, purple blood gushing from his mouth. He staggered to the comms and screamed for security teams to converge on engineering. He had a feeling he knew where the humans were going. In the bowels of the ship, the human commandos crouched before the huge armored blast door to the reactor chamber. They slapped breaching charges across its surface. "Get ready," the squad leader said. "We get one shot at this. We take that reactor and we go out in a blaze of glory for Earth." The Marines nodded grimly, checking their weapons one last time. This was what they had trained for, the ultimate sacrifice. They would die so that humanity could live. The commandos detonated the breaching charges. A thunderous blast shook the corridor as the massive blast door crumpled inward and crashed to the floor in a smoking ruin. The humans charged through the breach, storming into the blazing hell of the reactor chamber. Suddenly a blinding flash erupted before them. The commandos stumbled back, shielding their eyes. As the glare faded, a dozen towering figures materialized out of the light. Tharos and his elite Praetorian Guard teleported from his crippled flagship to mount a last stand. Tharos himself was a nightmarish sight, his few remaining patches of flesh interlaced with gleaming metal and whirring servos. His eyes blazed red with murderous hate. "Pathetic apes," he snarled. "You only delay the inevitable. The Klingon Empire will never fall to your kind." With a guttural roar, he and his warriors charged the outnumbered humans. Though the Marines' power armor gave them an edge, the Praetorians' savage fury and Tharos's terrifying cyborg strength quickly turned the tide. Disruptor shots hammered the humans' armor. Servos whined as metal fists pulverized bone, and Klingon blades ripped through reinforced carbotitanium as if it were paper. One by one the humans fell, blood spraying across the deck, agonized screams lost in the howl of the wounded reactor. Finally, only Sergeant Travis remained, his armor dented and sparking, his left arm a mangled ruin. Teeth gritted against the pain, Travis hurled himself at Tharos, unleashing a storm of blows. His armor's servos whined with each impact, artificial muscles straining. Tharos staggered back, shocked by the human's relentless assault. With a final Herculean effort, Travis seized Tharos and heaved, intending to throw them both into the reactor's seething core. For an instant, they teetered on the edge of oblivion. Then Tharos's metal hand shot out, clamping around Travis's throat. The cyborg wrenched him forward until they were face to face. Tharos squeezed, servos shrieking, Travis's armor buckling beneath his monstrous grip. "Earth will fall," Tharos grated. "Your species is doomed." Warning glyphs flashed across Travis's visor. His armor was about to fail. Suddenly his suit's AI chimed a warning. Sensors indicate incoming antimatter torpedo barrage. Hull breach imminent. Total structural failure in T-minus 60 seconds. Travis's pain-fogged brain processed this. Earth's fleet had broken through. The Klingon flagship was about to be atomized. He began to laugh, a raw, wheezing sound. Tharos' metal face twisted in rage. What is this? You lose, Travis rasped. We will never stop fighting. Even if Earth falls, humanity will hunt you to the end of the universe. With the last of his strength, he willed his armor's self-destruct systems to activate. A 5-kiloton nuclear blast erupted from his suit's microfusion core, consuming Travis, Tharos, and everything else in a 10-meter radius. Uncontrolled antimatter reactions raged through the reactor, ripping the guts out of the flagship. The Klingon ship exploded in a blinding flash, a miniature supernova blooming amid the void. The blast instantly atomized Tharos, his guard, and the rest of the ship's crew and systems. Not a single trace remained, only an expanding cloud of star-hot plasma. As the Klingon flagship detonated in a cataclysmic fireball, the surviving enemy ships fled in disarray, their command structure decapitated. On the bridge of the Titan, Kevin slammed his fist on the armrest of his command chair. "Pursue them! Don't let a single one escape!" he barked. The human fleet surged forward, disruptor cannons and plasma torpedoes scything through the Klingons' rear shields. Crippled ships spun out of control, trailing debris and bodies. "They're making a run for their homeworld," the sensor officer reported. "Then that's where we're going," Kevin said grimly. "It's time we ended this once and for all." The Titan led the charge as the fleet pursued the Klingons through hyperspace, weapons primed. They emerged in the Klingon home system, ready for battle. But the scene that greeted them was one of chaos. The space around the Klingon homeworld swarmed with ships, but not Klingon ones. These vessels were sleek, predatory, seeming to shimmer with an iridescent exoskeleton. And they were attacking the Klingons. "Sir, we're being hailed," the comms officer said. It's the Klingons." Kevin's eyes narrowed. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a battered Klingon bridge. The commander who appeared was haggard, bleeding from a head wound. "Admiral Burns," the Klingon said, his voice strained. "I am Commander Kraylock. I know we have no right to ask for mercy, but we need your help." "And why should we help you?" Kevin asked coldly. "Because if you don't, the Varoks will slaughter us all, and you'll be next." The screen shifted to display the alien ships. They moved with an insectoid efficiency, their weapons carving through Klingon hulls like scalpels. "The Varoks are an ancient enemy," Kraylock said. "They seek our extinction. Please, Admiral, aid us now, and we will surrender unconditionally. You'll never face a threat from us again." Kevin hesitated, torn. The Klingons were monsters, butchers of millions. They deserved annihilation. But this new enemy, if they could bring the Klingons to their knees so quickly, what chance would humanity stand alone? He made his choice. "All ships take up defensive positions around the Klingon homeworld. Protect the planet at all costs." As the human ships moved into place, the Varoks attacked with renewed fury. Wave after wave of crystalline ships slammed into the human formation, their weapons strange and terrible. The human shields flared and buckled under the onslaught, pushed to the limit. But they held, and from behind the human lines, the Klingons launched vicious counterattacks, using the humans as cover to strike the Varoks' flanks. Disruptor bolts and photon torpedoes flashed past human ships, pounding into Varoks' hulls. It was a devil's alliance, but it was working. The Varoks were taking unsustainable losses, but so were the humans and Klingons. Kevin watched the tactical display grimly as ship after ship winked out, consumed by the ravening swarms. How much longer could they hold out? And even if they won, what then? The Klingons would owe humanity their survival. But they were still Klingons. Could they ever be trusted? These thoughts weighed heavily on Kevin as the battle raged around him, the fate of two species hanging in the balance. He had bought time, but at what cost? As the Varrox and Klingon ships tore into each other in a vicious melee, Kevin Byrne stared intently at the tactical holodisplay hovering before him on the Titan's bridge. Red and green icons clashed and winked out as the alien fleets engaged in brutal close-quarters combat. Suddenly, a priority communique from human intelligence flashed onto the screen. "Admiral, you need to see this," the comms officer said urgently. "We've intercepted Klingon transmissions. They're planning to stab us in the back." Kevin's eyes narrowed as he speed-read the decrypted messages. The Klingons, even in their desperation, were preparing a treacherous surprise attack on the human fleet while they were occupied battling the Varrox. Fury ignited in Kevin's gut, but he quickly smothered it. He should have expected no less from the Klingons. Acknowledgement lights winked on the holodisplay as the human ships received their instructions. Smoothly, imperceptibly, the fleet began to reposition itself, the ponderous battleships shifting to screen the lighter cruisers and frigates. To the Klingons, locked in their death struggle with the Varrox, it looked like the humans were simply maneuvering to better engage the enemy. They had no idea of the trap being laid. The Titan shuddered as Varrox plasma blasts hammered its shields. On the view screen, a human cruiser, the Bellerophon, exploded as a Varrox energy lance punched through its armor. Kevin gritted his teeth. Just a little longer. Suddenly on the holodisplay, the Klingon ships began peeling away from the Varrox, wheeling to bring their weapons to bear on the human rear. The Klingons had sprung their trap, but the humans were ready. "Drop Q-bomb shields," Kevin commanded. "Fire on my command." As one, the human ships deactivated a specific section of their shields. Strapped to the exposed hulls were dozens of antimatter charges, the Q-bombs. Unshielded, the bomb's magnetic containment fields generated a unique signature, attracting the Klingons' target locks like moths to a flame. The Klingon ships opened fire, disruptor bolts and photon torpedoes lancing towards the human fleet, and straight into the Q-bombs. The Klingons realized their mistake too late. They tried desperately to disengage their firing solutions, but it was futile. The first Q-bomb detonated, the antimatter reacting with its matter containment shell in a blinding flash of pure energy. The blast instantly vaporized the Klingon ship that had triggered it, and then the explosion propagated, leaping from bomb to bomb in a cataclysmic chain reaction that tore through the Klingon fleet like the wrath of an angry god. Space itself seemed to convulse as a wave of unimaginable destruction consumed the Klingon betrayers in the blink of an eye. An entire armada, hundreds of ships strong, was simply erased from existence, leaving only a fading afterimage on Kevin's retinas. Even as the Q-bomb's apocalyptic blast faded, the human ships were already pivoting, bringing their primary weapons to bear on the Klingons' shattered remnants. A tsunami of missiles, rail cannon slugs and particle beams erupted from the human fleet, hammering into the Klingons' exposed flanks. The aliens reeled, their formation disintegrating under the onslaught. Ships shattered like glass, belching flame and debris. The few Klingon vessels that survived the initial fusillade broke and ran, fleeing in terror. Straight into the guns of the Varrox. The insectoid ships, momentarily forgotten in the Klingons' treachery and the humans' retaliation, fell on the Klingon survivors like wolves on wounded prey. Iridescent hulls shimmered as they pursued the fleeing Klingons, weapons flaring. The Klingon ships died in droves, torn apart by the Varrox's relentless assault. In minutes, it was over. The once proud Klingon fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage and cooling plasma. "Get us out of here," Kevin ordered, as the Varrox ships began to turn towards the humans, murder in their movements. "Maximum burn." The human fleet leaped to the edges of the system, engines straining. Behind them, the Varrox and the last few Klingon holdouts savaged each other, locked in a final cataclysmic confrontation. On the Titan's bridge, the weapons officer looked up from his console, face grim. "All ships report primary armaments charging, Admiral. Gravlance at 70%. Chrono torpedoes loading into tubes." Kevin nodded, his jaw set as he watched the alien fleets batter each other to pieces on the main view screen. The humans had played their hand masterfully, tricking the Klingons and Varroks into practically annihilating each other. But even in their weakened state, the survivors would still pose a deadly threat to humanity if allowed to escape and regroup. That would not happen. The human fleet would make sure of it. "Prepare a firing solution," Kevin said, his voice cold as the void. "Target the center of their formation. We'll take them both out at once." The weapons officer nodded, fingers flying over his console. The bridge fell silent, the crew holding a collective breath. This was it. The moment of truth. The alien ships writhed and slashed at each other, locked in a mortal embrace, heedless of the human fleet drawing a bead on them. On the tactical display, the firing solution blinked green. Kevin's finger hovered over the firing stud. One press, and he would unleash the most devastating weapons in the human arsenal on the unsuspecting aliens. One press, and humanity's greatest threats would be eliminated in one fell swoop. His finger began to descend. Just as Kevin's finger began to descend towards the firing key, every alarm on the bridge suddenly wailed to life. The tactical display flashed angry red as an unimaginable energy surge spiked off the scale. "Report!" Kevin barked, snatching his hand back from the control panel. "Massive spatial anomaly forming in the middle of the battlefield," the sensor officer shouted over the blaring alarms. It's like nothing I've ever seen." On the main view screen, the tangled knot of Klingon and Varrock ships suddenly scattered like startled minnows, as a blinding white rift yawned open in the heart of their formation. Reality itself seemed to shudder and warp around the edges of the anomaly, stars stretching into sickening streaks. And then from the heart of that blazing abyss, something emerged. At first, Kevin thought it must be an optical illusion, a trick of the eye caused by the anomaly's twisting of light. But as the object fully resolved, he felt his breath freeze in his lungs. It was a ship, but to call it such seemed almost laughable. The thing was gargantuan, dwarfing even the mightiest dreadnoughts of the human Klingon or Varrock's fleets. Its hull was a seamless expanse of jet-black metal that seemed to drink in the light around it. Kevin's mind reeled as he tried to comprehend the sheer scale of the behemoth. It was like a mountain hanging in space, a small moon bristling with alien weaponry. And those weapons were already firing. Beams of scintillating energy, hues that had no name in any human tongue, lanced out from the dreadnought's flanks, stabbing into the surrounding ships with merciless precision. Varroks and Klingon vessels alike simply vaporized under that onslaught, hulls flash-boiling away into clouds of plasma. The few shots that managed to strike back splashed harmlessly off the dreadnought's midnight hull, not even scorching the paintwork. "Evasive maneuvers!" Kevin roared as the dreadnought's guns began to swing towards the human fleet. "Get us out of here, maximum burn!" The Titan shuddered as her engines pushed far past the red line, the inertial compensators struggling to keep up. On the view screen, Kevin saw a dozen friendly IFF tags wink out in an instant as the alien ship's weapons found their mark. And then the dreadnought was turning to pursue, its colossal bulk impossibly agile. It swatted aside a brace of human torpedoes like gnats, its shields barely even flickering. Lances of that same awful energy reached out again, spearing human ships, breaching hulls and spilling crews into the frozen void. "It's no good," the helmsman shouted, her face sheened with sweat. "We can't outrun it, and our weapons aren't even scratching it." Kevin felt an icy hand clutch his heart as he watched the dreadnought carving through his fleet like a scythe through wheat. They couldn't fight this thing. They couldn't even flee from it. It was going to hunt them down and slaughter them, ship by ship, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. "All ships, emergency jump," he ordered, his voice cracking. "Scatter into hyperspace, random vectors. We'll regroup at Rally Point Omega." It was a desperate ploy, the tactical equivalent of throwing chaff to confuse a missile. But it was their only chance. If they could just disperse widely enough, maybe the dreadnought wouldn't be able to track them all. Maybe some of them could slip away. The human ships, leaking atmosphere and trailing debris, flickered and vanished one by one, as they hurled themselves blindly into hyperspace. The dreadnought's weapons stabbed and slashed, picking off the slowest, the most damaged, but it couldn't stop them all. Kevin held his breath as the Titan's hyperdrive whined to full power, the stars outside stretching into lines. Just a few more seconds. And then they were gone, the twisted battle vanishing in a smear of pseudo-motion. Kevin collapsed back into his command chair, his heart hammering against his ribs. They'd escaped. Barely. But what about the Klingons, the Varrocs? He pulled up a last sensor log of the battle site just before their jump. What he saw made his blood run cold. The alien fleets, already savaged by each other, had been simply shattered by the dreadnought's onslaught. Broken hulks tumbled in the void, leaking plasma and bodies. A few Klingon and Varroc ships were still in motion, fleeing frantically. The dreadnought prowled almost lazily among them, swatting them down one by one with contemptuous ease. In mere minutes, nothing remained but expanding clouds of irradiated debris and frozen corpses. An extinction-level event delivered in moments. 1,000 ships, millions of lives, snuffed out between one breath and the next. The sheer callousness, the casualness of the slaughter made Kevin's gorge rise. What the hell was that thing? Where had it come from and why had it attacked? A cold lump of dread formed in his gut as he considered the implications. A ship that size, that powerful, it hadn't been built on a whim. It was the product of a military-industrial complex beyond anything humanity or the other races possessed. An empire that made the Klingons look like Stone Age savages in comparison. Kevin felt his blood turn to ice water in his veins. They'd been followed? How? The viewscreen flickered, resolving into an image that made Kevin's jaw drop open in shock. He had been expecting an alien, some tentacled monstrosity or chitinous horror. Instead, he found himself staring at a human face. A man middle-aged with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. He wore a uniform of unfamiliar cut and color, a rank insignia gleaming on his collar. "Admiral Burns," the man said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I am Admiral Terminus of the Galactic Federation timeship Eschaton. I apologize for the abrupt nature of our meeting, but time is short. I have come to deliver a warning and an ultimatum." Kevin finally found his voice. "Timeship, Galactic Federation? What the hell are you talking about, and why did you just slaughter thousands of—" Terminus cut him off with a sharp gesture. "The details are unimportant. Suffice it to say I am from your future, 1,000 years from now to be precise, and in that future, the war that you have just started with the Klingons and Varrocs does not end. Not in a year, not in a century. It drags on, escalating, drawing in ever more races, consuming world after world in an orgy of destruction. The galaxy itself is left a blasted wasteland, trillions dead, space itself poisoned by the detritus of unending conflict. It is a hell beyond imagining." Kevin shook his head in denial. "No, that's impossible. We'll stop them. We'll find a way to make peace." Terminus laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Peace? With the Klingons? The Varrocs? You don't know them like I do, Admiral. They will never stop. They will never surrender. And in the end, neither will you. The war will become all you know, all your children and your children's children know. An eternal cycle of hate and vengeance." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Kevin's. "But it doesn't have to be that way. My crew and I, we have dedicated our lives to ending the war before it can begin, to stopping the cycle before it starts, by any means necessary." A chill ran down Kevin's spine at those words. "What do you mean? What are you going to do?" Terminus's face was cold and implacable as stone. "I will end this, Admiral Burns. No matter the cost, the war will not begin, even if I have to wipe all 3 of your species from the face of the galaxy to ensure it." Kevin stared at Terminus's face on the viewscreen, his mind reeling. Time travel, the end of the galaxy? It was too much to take in. "I know it's a lot to process," Terminus said as if reading his thoughts, "but I assure you every word is true. In my time, the galaxy is a graveyard, trillions dead, because of the war you've just started." "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Kevin demanded. "This could all be some kind of trick." Terminus' eyes hardened. Very well, let me prove it to you. He began to reel off a list of events, battles, betrayals, atrocities, that Kevin knew had not yet happened, but which aligned perfectly with the strategic projections of his own intelligence analysts. The level of detail was staggering, the implications horrifying. As Terminus spoke, Kevin felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. This was no deception. Terminus was exactly who he claimed to be. And if he was right about the future... "My God," Kevin whispered, "what can we do? How can we stop it?" "There's only one way," Terminus said grimly. "We must eradicate the Klingons and the Varrocs down to the last child, wipe them from the face of the universe before they can spread their poison across the stars." Kevin recoiled. "Genocide? You're talking about murdering billions of sentient beings." "To save trillions," Terminus countered. "If we don't act, the galaxy will burn. Is that what you want?" Kevin hesitated, torn. The thought of slaughtering entire species sickened him, but if it was the only way to prevent the apocalypse Terminus had described... "I need time," he said at last. "I need to consult with my superiors, my government. I can't make a decision like this on my own." Terminus's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Very well, I will grant you a temporary ceasefire. But do not take too long, Admiral. The fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance." Has the communication ended? Kevin slumped in his chair, his mind a whirl. He had bought some time, but for what? To choose between two nightmares? How could he possibly make such a decision? Aboard the eschaton, Terminus stalked the dimly lit corridors, his face a thundercloud. The human admiral was weak, indecisive. He couldn't see the necessity of what must be done. But Terminus would make him see, one way or another. As he strode onto the bridge, his second-in-command, Commander Zara looked up from her console, concern etched on her features. "Sir, many of the crew are expressing doubts about our mission. They're uncomfortable with the idea of genocide, even to save the future." Terminus scowled. "They'll do as they're told. We can't afford to go soft, not now." Zara stood facing him directly. "Sir, I must object. Surely there must be another way. We have a duty to find a better solution than just slaughtering billions." Terminus' face contorted with rage. He lunged forward, seizing Zara by the throat. She choked, scrabbling at his iron grip. "I will not tolerate insubordination," Terminus snarled. "We will do whatever is necessary to save the future. And if you can't stomach that, then you're of no use to me." With a brutal twist, he snapped Zara's neck. She went limp, eyes glazing over. Terminus let her body slump to the deck. "Let that be a lesson to all of you," he growled to the shocked bridge crew. "We will do what must be done, no matter the cost." But as he turned away, he failed to see the looks of horror and anger on the faces of his crew. Nor did he see the surreptitious glances, the subtle nods of agreement. It began in engineering. A small group of officers, sickened by Terminus' brutality, began to sabotage key systems. They worked quickly and quietly, disguising their actions amid routine maintenance. In the armory, sympathetic crewmen began to stockpile weapons, passing them out to trusted allies. Whispers spread through the ship like wildfire. Terminus had gone too far. Something had to be done. The tipping point came when Terminus ordered the eschaton to set course for the Varrocs' homeworld, intending to begin the genocide immediately. The mutineers knew they had to act now, before it was too late. It began with a power outage, plunging the ship into darkness. Terminus stormed onto the bridge, demanding answers, but was met with a volley of stunner blasts. He fell, unconscious, before he hit the deck. All across the ship, the mutineers rose up, overwhelming the Loyalists through sheer numbers and surprise. On the bridge, in engineering, in the armory. Fierce firefights erupted as the two sides clashed. Energy blasts scorched bulkheads, the screams of the wounded and dying echoing through the corridors. But the mutineers had planned well. They targeted key systems, crippling the ship's weapons and shields. The Loyalists fought bravely, but they were outmatched and outflanked. In a final desperate gambit, a group of mutineers stormed the bridge. They cut down Terminus's elite guard in a hail of blaster fire, then turned their weapons on the Admiral himself. Terminus, battered and bloody but still defiant, reached for his side armor but too late. A dozen stun blasts struck him at once and he crumpled, the fight gone out of him. On the Titan's bridge, Kevin watched in amazement as the Eschaton's shields flickered and died, its weapons falling silent. He realized immediately what must have happened. "Now," he roared, "all ships, open fire, pour it on." The human fleet surged forward, every ship unloading its full arsenal into the crippled dreadnought. Missiles, plasma torpedoes, grav lances, a storm of destruction hammered into the Eschaton's hull, blasting through armor, rupturing compartments, setting off secondary explosions that ripped through the ship like firestorms. The Eschaton shuddered under the onslaught, its hull cracking apart, atmosphere venting in massive plumes. Escape pods began to jet away from the dying Leviathan, the mutineers abandoning ship. And then, with a final titanic blast, the Eschaton's reactor went critical. A miniature sun bloomed in the heart of the dreadnought, consuming it from the inside out. The ship exploded in a blinding flash of light, a spherical shockwave of debris and energy expanding outward like a supernova. When the glare faded, nothing remained of the Eschaton but a fading afterimage and a field of cooling wreckage. Terminus, his ship, his horrific plan, all had been wiped away in the space of a few minutes. On the Titan's bridge, Kevin let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They had done it. The future Terminus had warned of had been averted. The genocide would not happen. But even as relief washed over him, Kevin felt a twinge of unease. The Eschaton had been destroyed, but the underlying cause of the future war had not. The Klingons, the Varrocs, they were still out there, battered but unbroken, and humanity's relations with them were still strained to the breaking point. Terminus had been wrong in his methods, but had he been right about the inevitability of the conflict? Had they really changed anything, or just delayed the reckoning? Kevin shook his head. Those were questions for another day. For now they had won a great victory. They had saved billions of lives. That was enough. As the blinding flash of the dreadnought's destruction faded, Kevin stared at the tactical display, with a mix of relief and trepidation. The Eschaton was gone, reduced to a cloud of cooling plasma and irradiated shrapnel. But what of the Klingons and Varrocs? Had the dreadnought's onslaught crippled them, or merely enraged them further? "Take us in carefully," Kevin ordered. "Full scans, maximum alert. If anything so much as twitches wrong, I want to know about it." The Titan glided forward, the rest of the human fleet fanning out behind it in a defensive formation. As they approached the drifting wreckage of the alien armadas, Kevin expected at any moment to see a disruptor battery swivel in their direction or a plasma torpedo come screaming towards them. But there was nothing. No signs of life, no indications of activity. Just the twisted, blackened hulks of once mighty warships, spinning slowly in the void. "Sir, I'm not detecting any power signatures," the sensor officer reported, her voice tinged with disbelief. "No weapons, no shields, not even life support. It's like they're dead." Kevin leaned forward, hardly daring to hope. Could it be? Had the dreadnought's rampage truly shattered the Klingons and Varrocs so utterly? The comms officer nodded, fingers flying over his console. "Channel open, sir." Kevin took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "Klingon and Varrocs forces," he began, his voice booming across the comm frequencies. "This is Admiral Kevin Burns of the Terran Fleet. Your armadas lie in ruins, your command structures shattered. You have seen the power we wield, the alliances we forge. You cannot hope to stand against us. But I am not without mercy. Surrender now unconditionally, and your lives will be spared. Your worlds will be occupied, but your people will endure. Resist, and we will annihilate you down to the last ship, the last soldier, the last child. The choice is yours." Kevin closed the channel and waited, scarcely breathing. For a long, tense moment there was nothing but the hiss of static. Then, "Human vessel, this is Commander Kraylock of the Klingon Defense Forces," a ragged voice crackled over the comms. "We surrender. Our weapons are powered down, our shields lowered. We are at your mercy." Kevin blinked in surprise. He had expected defiance, even in the face of annihilation, for the proud Klingons to capitulate so readily. "Admiral Burns, this is Overseer Zaxxas of the Varrox Hive Guard," another voice chimed in, sounding equally beaten. "We also surrender. Our queen is dead. Our swarms scattered. We will submit to your authority." But even as his crew erupted into cheers around him, Kevin felt a chill run down his spine. Something wasn't right. This was all too easy, too neat. After centuries of bloodshed, for both races to simply roll over and surrender. It defied belief. "Signal the fleet," he ordered, his voice cutting through the celebration like a knife. "Begin taking on prisoners and preparing occupation forces, but I want the dreadnought wreckage secured immediately. Have our best people comb through every inch of it. Something tells me we haven't seen the last of our friend from the future." As the fleet moved to obey, Kevin stared out at the endless expanse of stars, a cold knot of dread forming in his gut. They had won the war, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was just beginning. Hours bled into days as the human fleet worked to secure its victory. Klingon and Varrox crews were disarmed and interned, their ships impounded or destroyed. Occupation forces were dispatched to the aliens' homeworlds and colonies, enforcing humanity's will at gunpoint. But even as the Titan hung in orbit over the smouldering ruin that had once been the Klingon throne world, Kevin found no joy in the triumph. His mind kept circling back to Terminus, to the dreadnought, to the dark future the rogue admiral had come back to prevent. "Sir, you need to see this." The voice of his chief engineer crackled over the comm, shaking Kevin from his brooding. "We found something in the wreckage, something impossible." Minutes later, Kevin strode into the Titan's hangar bay where a team of scientists and engineers were huddled around a collection of twisted, half-melted fragments laid out on a workbench. "What am I looking at?" Kevin demanded. The chief engineer, a woman named Jada, looked up at him, her face pale. "Components, sir, from the dreadnought, but they're not Klingon or Varrox. They're human." Kevin frowned. "Human? How is that possible? We don't have anything close to that level of technology." "I know, sir, but look." Jada held up a charred, warped piece of metal. Embossed on its surface, barely visible beneath the carbon scoring, was a single word: Unisol. "United Soul," Kevin murmured, his blood running cold. "But that's the government of Earth 1,000 years from now," Jada finished grimly. "According to Terminus, at least." "There's more, sir," Jada said quietly. "We analyzed the dreadnought's jump trajectory, the anomaly that brought it here. It wasn't natural. Something, or someone, generated it deliberately. The dreadnought didn't come back by accident. It was sent." Kevin's head snapped up, his eyes widening. "Sent? By who? Why?" Before Jada could answer, the hangar bay was suddenly awash in red light as alarms blared throughout the ship. "Admiral, to the bridge!" the intercom boomed. "Priority alert from Solcom. Massive energy surge detected near Saturn. Something's coming through." Kevin was moving before the announcement finished, sprinting for the lift. His mind raced as he hurtled onto the bridge, barely registering the controlled chaos around him. "Report," he snapped. "A hyperspace rupture forming near the Cassini division," the sensor officer called out. "Massive energy readings, off the charts." The main view screen flickered, then resolved into an image that seared itself into Kevin's brain. A colossal ring, gleaming silver and black, hung against the starry backdrop of Saturn's rings. It was unimaginably vast, stretching from horizon to horizon, dwarfing even the mighty gas giant behind it. And across its curving surface, etched in letters that burned with the cold fire of 1,000,000 stars, was a single word. As the impossibly vast ring world filled the view screens, dwarfing even the mighty Titan, Kevin Burns felt his breath catch in his throat. The structure was a monument to madness, a twisted testament to the depths of Terminus's obsession. Suddenly the comm crackled to life. A hologram flickered into existence on the bridge. The image of Terminus himself, his face a mask of cold triumph. "Admiral Burns," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Congratulations on your victory over the Klingons and Variks, but your true test is yet to come." Terminus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I am not from your future, Admiral. I am from an alternate timeline, one where humanity was annihilated by the very aliens you just defeated." "In my timeline, I was the last human alive," Terminus continued. "I watched as the Klingons, the Variks, and a dozen other species burned our worlds, slaughtered our people. And in the end, I alone survived." He gestured to the ring world. "This is my monument to our fallen race, and the instrument of my vengeance. With the technology of this ring world, I will erase this timeline and create a new one. A universe where humanity reigns supreme and all other species kneel before us or perish." Kevin's hands clenched into fists. "You're insane. I won't let you destroy everything we've fought for." "You have no choice, Admiral." Terminus's eyes glittered with malice. "The process has already begun. In a matter of hours, this reality will be overwritten, unless—" He paused, savoring the moment. "Unless you can stop me. Destroy this ring world and my plan fails. But to do that, you'll have to sacrifice everything." Kevin felt a leaden weight settle in his gut. He knew what he had to do. The human fleet unleashed a storm of missiles, railgun slugs, and particle beams. The ring world's surface erupted in flames as the bombardment struck home, blasting vast craters and fissures into the alien metal. But even as entire sections crumbled and collapsed, the structure held, shrugging off the onslaught like a mountain weathering a rainstorm. "It's not enough," Kevin muttered. "We need to hit it from the inside." He turned to his crew. "I need volunteers for a boarding mission. We're going to infiltrate that ring world and sabotage its power core. It's the only way to stop this, once and for all." Every hand on the bridge shot up. Kevin felt a surge of pride amid the fear and desperation. These were the best humanity had to offer, brave, determined, ready to sacrifice everything for the greater good. He chose a dozen of his most skilled officers and Marines, then led them to the hangar bay. They boarded a heavily armed shuttle and blasted out of the Titan, weaving through the chaos of the battle towards a gaping hole the fleet's weapons had torn in the ring world's hull. As they plunged into the breach, Kevin steeled himself for the fight of his life. Somewhere in this labyrinth of alien corridors and chambers lay the key to their salvation, or their doom. And he would not fail, could not fail. The fate of humanity, of the entire galaxy, rested on his shoulders. The shuttle touched down in a cavernous hangar, and the boarding team leapt out, weapons at the ready. Instantly, alarms began to wail and security doors slammed shut around them. They were in the belly of the beast now, with no way out but forward. "Move out," Kevin ordered. "Stay sharp and check your corners. We need to find that power core." They advanced through the ring world's twisting corridors, following the schematics their scans had gleaned. But with every step, resistance intensified. Terminus's fanatics, both human and alien, threw themselves at the borders with suicidal fervor. Firefights erupted in cramped hallways and vaulted atriums as the team fought their way deeper into the structure. Kevin led from the front, his rifle blazing, cutting down foes left and right. His armor was pocked with scorches and dents, his face streaked with sweat and blood, but he pressed on with grim determination. At last they reached the central power chamber, a vast spherical room dominated by a pulsing column of blinding energy, the power core, the heart of the ring world, and standing before it, flanked by his elite guard, was Terminus himself. "Welcome, Admiral," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "You fought well, but it ends here." He raised his hand, and Kevin saw he was holding a small device, a dead man's switch. "This is a quantum cascade trigger," Terminus said. "With a single press, it will detonate a chain of explosives I've placed throughout your fleet. Your ships will be instantly vaporized." Kevin's blood ran cold. If Terminus set off those bombs, the human fleet would be annihilated in seconds. Everything they'd fought for, all the sacrifices they'd made, would be for nothing. "Surrender now," Terminus demanded, "and I will spare your crew. Resist and they die with you." Kevin met Terminus's gaze, his eyes hard as flint. "Go to hell." And with that he charged, a wordless battle cry tearing from his throat. His team surged forward with him, and the chamber erupted into a maelstrom of whirling blades, flashing energy beams, and spraying blood. It was a battle out of nightmare, human against human, fought with a savagery that defied belief. Kevin's armor shorted out, sparking and smoking, but he fought on with rifle and combat knife, hacking and blasting his way through the enemy. His team fell around him one by one, cut down by the cold precision of Terminus's guard, but they sold their lives dearly. In the end, only Kevin and Terminus remained, locked in mortal combat before the seething fury of the power core. They traded blows with titanic force, augmented muscles straining, bones cracking. Kevin felt ribs shatter under Terminus's fists, felt his own knife plunge into the traitor's flesh again and again. But even as he drove Terminus back, Kevin saw the madman's thumb twitch towards the dead man's switch. In a final desperate lunge, Kevin seized Terminus's wrist, wrenching it away from the trigger. The device clattered to the floor. For a single crystalline moment, the two men stared at each other, panting, bleeding. Then Kevin slammed his head forward, crushing Terminus's nose in a spray of blood. As the traitor reeled back, Kevin scooped up the quantum cascade trigger. Then he tackled Terminus, hurling them both off the platform and into the seething energy of the power core. As the blinding light enveloped them, Kevin felt a strange sense of peace. He had done his duty. Humanity would survive. The galaxy would be free. The power core detonated in a blinding flash, a miniature supernova erupting in the heart of the ringworld. The chain reaction tore through the megastructure like wildfire, ripping apart metal and stone, vaporizing everything in its path. On the bridge of the Titan, the crew watched in stunned awe as the ringworld shattered, consumed from within by the unimaginable forces it had once controlled. Vast sections broke away, crumbling into glowing debris as secondary explosions dotted the disintegrating structure. "All ships, emergency jump," the XO shouted, snapping them out of their paralysis. "Get us out of here." The human fleet fled, racing against the shockwave of destruction. Ships strained their engines to the breaking point, pushed their reactors to the red line and beyond. And still the fury of the dying ringworld nipped at their heels, a tidal wave of plasma and shrapnel that threatened to swallow them whole. But even as the fleet leapt into the safety of hyperspace, the crew of the Titan knew that their escape had come at a terrible cost. Kevin Burns, the hero who had led them to victory against impossible odds, was gone, sacrificed to save them all. In the days that followed, as the fleet limped back to Earth, the survivors struggled to come to terms with what they had seen, what they had learned. The revelation of the alternate timeline, of the grim fate that had almost befallen them, weighed heavily on every heart. The knowledge of how close they had come to annihilation, how much they had lost to prevent it, was almost too much to bear. But amid the grief and the trauma, a flicker of hope remained. For in the fleet's databanks a final message from Kevin Burns was discovered, a message recorded in the moments before his death. "If you're seeing this," the Admiral's image said, his face bruised and bloodied but his eyes clear and determined, "then I didn't make it. But that's all right, because it means you did. It means humanity is safe." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "But never forget the lesson of this day. Never forget how close we came to destroying ourselves. Hate, vengeance, the lust for power, these are the true enemies, and they lurk in every heart, human and alien alike. We have a chance now, a chance to build a better future. A future where we stand not as conquerors, but as allies. Where we reach out to the stars not in fear and aggression, but in friendship and cooperation. It won't be easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, conflicts. But we must persevere, for if we do not, if we let our baser instincts consume us, then all our struggles, all our sacrifices, will have been for nothing." The message ended, and as the fleet sailed on through the silent stars, the men and women of the Titan, of the entire human navy, made a silent vow to honor their fallen leader, to safeguard the future he had given everything to protect, and to never, ever forget. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.